Hello, friends. Thanks for tuning in. I know I say this every week, but this is really an incredible episode that we have this week. But before I get into that, as always, please review, subscribe, follow, rate, all the things that you can do on the podcast. Really appreciate that. I'm seeing people do it more. So any effort that you can do, it takes 2 seconds, but I really do appreciate if you guys could do that. Again, follow me, Instagram, Twitter, daily, semi-daily updates, releases. Those are the platforms. So this week I have David Crowe. I can't explain how much of an unbelievable story this is, and I won't. I will actually leave it for David himself to do because he can express it in a way that only he can express it and tell his story in a way that is moving, sobering, eye-opening, insightful, sad, scary, humorous, just all the range of emotions that you could go through, you will go through in this episode. And definitely when you read his book, by the way, which is called The Pale-Faced Lie, I will make sure to leave a link in the show notes so you guys can quickly go and buy it. Unbelievable book. David is a speaker. He's an author. And I'm thinking about how much I should give away. I don't want to give away too much. I think that, like I said, David, I won't do it justice. David does a much better job of sharing his life on the podcast. And I think it's about a 2.5 hour podcast. So there's a lot of information. And I think I prefer you going into this without a lot of prior knowledge. So why not just get into it? Grab a glass of wine or a glass of coffee, sit down, relax, and this is definitely a roller coaster. So I hope you guys enjoy the podcast. I hope you guys take away some lessons from David and I's conversation, because I feel like there's a lot of really good gems that are useful, and I just hope you enjoy it. So without further ado, let me introduce this week's guest, David Crowe. Enjoy the episode, everyone.
The Genuinely Interested Podcast.
And we're live. David Crowe, how you doing?
Roy, I am very good. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast. It's a pleasure just to get to know you a little bit before this started. And I already can tell you and I are on the same page on a number of things on how we feel about life. So yeah, that's always nice.
I sometimes I feel like the pre-talk before we start recording sometimes is like so good. I'm like, oh, I wish it's like I wish I would have gotten some of those gems that we before we started recording. But it was super nice to meet you, super nice to get to know you, and I'm super excited about our conversation coming up.
Me too, and I feel like I already know you, and that makes it really nice. It's a pleasure to be on your show, and I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you, man. So, excuse me. So for people who may not know you and may not know your book, maybe you can tell them a little bit about The Pale-Faced Lie, your fairly new memoir. Yeah.
It is, Roy. And, I guess I've learned to do the elevator pitch. And any of us writing a book, you have to write a query letter that gets an acquisition editor, or publisher, an agent interested. So I'm not sure mine's perfect, but I can distill it down. So I'm born 9 months, just about, after my dad gets out of the San Quentin Penitentiary in California for a crime that could have gotten him the death penalty very easily. He got extremely lucky. So he had to do 2 things. One, he needed to take my mother and sister, who was born while he was in prison. He needed to get them to a place where he could lie about being a violent felon without somebody checking up. And you're way before computers, way before internet, cell phone. You're just landlines, and not everybody can afford those, right? So he fled to the Navajo Indian Reservation, and he could lie about being a violent felon. He could get recommendations, and also he thought his accomplice would never find him there, and he was right on both scores, right? So in the 50s and 60s, when I was raised on the Navajo Indian Reservation, the Navajo people, not many had been to college yet, and it's very different now. Very, you've got a very superior, educated at the top. The bottom's still no different. But if you showed up on a reservation and you didn't kill somebody the first day, and you could drive a truck and use a shovel, you probably got a promotion. Nobody wanted to go there from outside.
Yeah.
And so Dad took us to the Navajo Indian Reservation and recreated himself, right? No one knew about the prison and the crime or anything. And in repositioning himself, he created that he's a full-blooded Cherokee, which we'll get to. But my very first memory, so this part of the reservation is on what we call the high desert plain. So it's above 7,000 feet. Arizona is very topographically different, right? You've got Superstition Mountain at 12,000 feet, and Phoenix is just about sea level. You can drive that span in like today and go 50, 60 degrees difference in like 3 hours. So it was a very frozen day in the winter. And Dad used to take me out in what I called the Green Bomber. He had this Nash Rambler. They don't make them anymore, thank God. And he would drive out into the frozen desert, hit the brakes and spin it. And you'd fall all over the car. And then when it straightened up, he'd do it again. And we would have our talks. My very first memory is, we have to get rid of your mother because she's crazy. And if you grow up with her, you'll be just as crazy as she is. When I tell you this time, we have to get rid of her. And that's my first memory. And my life, and that may have been the easiest day. The trip through, all the way through with my dad until adulthood, was just a constant series of disasters that he mostly created, dealings with a very, very mentally ill mother, and just trying to survive him. And you throw in the Navajo Indians, where you're growing up on a reservation, in a part of reservation where you're not allowed to live, and you're trying to succeed there. It was an insane situation. Every day was just, you'd think, I got to get through today. I've got to be able to get to school without getting killed. I've got to get home without getting beaten up so bad I can't show up the next day. I've got to make sure he doesn't beat me to death tonight. And you get creative. I always had a very dark sense of humor. I will say it saved me, but I just tried to act out, try to do anything I could to distract myself. I tried to be out of the house every minute of every day.
Yeah.
Ran every day as far as I could run, and then ran all the way home from like 4 on to exhaust myself. And then I did all the reading I could. And then when I was out of the house, I raised all the hell I could raise.
Wow. There's a lot to unpack there.
And there was a lot of hell to raise too. Different day today. No cell phones. No.
How did they accept you there on the reservation for the most part?
Let's start with not at all. So you learn a great deal when you're in a situation like that all people are just people. But when you start, so let me set the table.
Sure.
The parents of my classmates had all been raised in the Navajo boarding schools. So what they did with these kids, and there's good reading on this, the Bureau of Indian Affairs rounded them up from their hogans and where they're raising sheep, and just herded them. They rounded them up, took them to boarding school where you're there for 10 months, 24 hours a day. The first thing they do is shave your head, take off anything that reminds them you of Indian, wash your mouth out with lye soap, if you speak a word of Navajo, they slap you as hard as they can in the back of your head.
Jesus.
These gentle Franciscan nuns and teachers. And they beat you anytime you ever say a word Navajo. They force you to learn English, and they spend all their time telling you that your religion is pagan, superstitious, that you're kind of third world cretins and idiots. And the motto is, we have to kill the Indian to save the man. And they create this school system, and their kids, I was in the first generation of integrated schools. And let me tell you, did those kids hate you if you were a non-Indian? You bet they did. And of course, I could understand why, right? I mean, like they've been through really tough things. But I learned some. If you last to the third year, you start getting treated different. So there's three kinds of white people come through reservations, just to be very stereotypical. But I think particularly then, you had the missionaries, mostly Catholic, who thought they were at the edge of the world, to do the Lord's work. And they were pretty tough people, Franciscans. You had people that came through there, like teachers that couldn't get a job anywhere else. They'll stay a year or two. And you have people that come and think that living on a reservation is the closest thing to the Garden of Eden. And of course, that's very quickly, it didn't take long to go, oh my God, why are we in a fenced-in compound with a cattle guard that's got barbed wire? So, and then you have the guy or gal running from the world. They're hiding out where they couldn't make it anywhere else. And and some of them are just insane. And as you know, from reading my book and my paper out, I was the paper boy. I created what I call the Crowe Craziness Index on a scale of 1 to 6. I wasn't smart enough to go to 10. If you hit a 6, you are a true nutcase.
Yeah.
And so I created all of these scenarios and things to do that distracted me. I delivered 5 newspapers a day, and there were packs of rabid dogs, kids with those 6-ounce Coca-Cola bottles at my head. They'd fire pellet guns at you. And I had pretty thick glasses. And my dad taught me a trick about the rabid dogs. I mean, they would just eat you up. So we went to a store in Gallup. I got one of these big machine guns, filled it with ammonia. And when the dogs would chase me, I'd shoot them in the nose with ammonia. And by the way, that will work on any dog. And so I just found these little ways to kind of get through the day and amuse myself. I read all 5 newspapers I delivered: Navajo Times, Gallup Independent, Arizona Republic, the Albuquerque Journal. And I read and ran and just created scenarios and I got to know my customers, my Navajo customers. Most of them wouldn't speak to me. They're pretty introverted. The adults are. The kids would speak to you at school. I got to know the Trading Post owner, who was a 3rd-generation Mormon gentleman, 95, still a friend of mine. The Mormons ran the Trading Post then because they were the first Anglos. They were business-oriented. Yeah. And the head of the Trading Post spoke Navajo before he spoke English. He spoke 5 languages: Navajo, Apache, Ute, Cheyenne, Spanish, and English. I would hang out with him. I just did anything I could to not feel like I was in the situation I was in.
Yeah.
Right. Anything I could do. And I was the class clown. I was a big hot dog. I raised constant hell. I pulled off pranks that you could never get away with, but would make the kids gasp. And by the 3rd year, they started calling me Crowe in Navajo as Gagi.
Okay.
When I became Gagi, from then on, life was mostly good.
Yeah.
And
outside the home.
The home was always a catastrophe.
Yeah.
And the other quality I learned, I guess this is what happens when your dad teaches you what maximum security prisoners learn. Anybody that really crossed me and was mean to me, I got even with them. And they really thought about doing anything to me a second time.
Mm-hmm.
So these are just things you learn and do and develop. You would have done it. You're looking for a way to survive. You're looking for a way to be okay. And you're a kid who can't be a kid, right? You got a father training you to be and teaching you to steal very high priced tools and fencing them, being his lookout. He's explaining to you that murder is the easiest crime because you do it right there. There's there's no suspects. There's nobody. There's no witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
So what the other kids are learning about baseball, my dad, we'd be driving along and he'd say, "You see that guy walking along the street? Yeah. What if we killed him right now?" And you go, what are you saying? What's the last car you saw? Truck, probably. What was the license tag? What direction? How close to a police station? Where are we from the nearest place we could bury him where no one could see him? What direction do you think he came from? What's his age? And we would play these games, these scenarios. And you had to go along, at least I felt that way, with him just to get beat less, right? Because he's got the buckle into the belt and he's built like an NFL linebacker.
Yeah.
So I would say, Dad, 3 trucks came by. 2 were New Mexico tags. They're yellow. 1 was an Arizona tag. They're blue. The nearest police station is 5 miles behind you. We haven't seen a car or truck coming behind us in 10 minutes. 1 came by the other way in 5 minutes. There's a bridge up ahead. You could probably bury him under there. And this was father-son talk.
So like a normal father, I don't know, his kid would come back from a soccer game, scored 2 goals, and he'd be like, "I'm so proud of you. Good for you." Your father, essentially, if you came up with a perfect murder plan, that was his, "I'm proud of you, son," pat on the back.
If I could think of something that he thought was clever. So he was always worried. This is interesting. He's always worried about his accomplice. We never knew his name. I learned it. And as you know, in the book, I befriended the son of the accomplice and I had to tell the accomplice's son why his dad was in San Quentin because his dad never told him. I'm getting ahead of the story. So the guy that was his accomplice was not a mean man. My dad talked him into helping him on what was to be a murder. The guy was a hero worshiper and he just thought my dad was a god and we should go avenge this injustice. Mm-hmm. But Dad really betrayed him, really pinned the crime on him. And the guy served a lot of time basically for doing what his friend told him to do. So Dad always thought that the accomplice would show up and kill him at some point. And of course, if I was the accomplice, that's exactly what I'd be thinking because what my dad did to him was unforgivable. But we would never go into any building that was public that didn't have an entrance and an exit that you could easily see. We never sat by a window. Before we went into the little town of Gallup, which is 25, 30 miles away from where we live, we would drive up and down the street. Dad would make me walk through the parking lot. And you're on Route 66 back in the day when people came through, Route 66 was a big deal. And are there any cars in the parking lot that don't make sense? Tell me the states in the parking lot. Tell me anything that looks unusual. And there was a point when I knew what he meant.
Yeah.
What doesn't fit? And if he ever thought he saw the accomplice and he thought I didn't tip him off that something was different, he'd hit me hard, right? And you learned to be his eyes and ears. You learned to think like him. You learned what a criminal thinks like. And I remember at one point I thought, oh my God, I'm a full-fledged criminal. I understand this world perfectly.
What age is this?
Probably by the time I was 12. I thought, because, just to give you another example. So Dad would steal these tools on weekends, these big warehouses. For your listener, the Navajo Indian Reservation is bigger than the state of West Virginia. It's bigger than all of New England. And so he is a guy who has access to all these warehouses. So the Bureau of Indian Affairs does everything. They build, they fix roads, They maintain, all the infrastructure, although none of it's very good. And so these warehouses have these tools. And back in the day, the electric tools, electric saws, screwdrivers, anything electric was very expensive and very lucrative. Yeah. So he would steal it. No one did a very good job with inventory. So we would go on weekends and steal these tools. And I was his lookout. If we saw a truck coming, and of course, you're sitting out where you can see a truck from probably 20 miles. But if I saw something suspicious, I threw a rock against the warehouse because they're all corrugated steel. If I was nervous, I threw 2 rocks. If I threw 3 rocks in a row, that meant get the heck out of the warehouse. We got trouble.
Yeah.
And so I was the lookout. And I was constantly, are we going to get caught? And then we would go to the town of Gallup, and Dad would fence these tools. But during our talks, so when I'm little, and of course I'm reading every newspaper, and I'm the paper boy. So the in cold blood murders happened. This is before Truman Capote made him famous and wrote the incredible book In Cold Blood. But the scenario was 2 prisoners, neither one who were violent, both in prison for stealing and multiple stealing, became friends in prison. And as the story goes, in their friendship, there's some kind of vague homosexual piece of hero worship. And my dad had that with his own accomplice. The accomplice, kind of loved him like in a hero way. I'm using Dad's words, not mine. I don't want to get any crosswise with people. It's on something I know nothing about. But what I do know about is these prisoners egged each other on. And they thought the one guy was a hired man on a farm, thought there was a big safe. When they get to the farm, they kill everybody. But the lesson I'm trying to leave for our listener is neither prisoner would have done this if they had been alone. But if you get certain prisoners together, 1 and 1 is 4 instead of 2. So Dad's explaining to me, because the murders were written about constantly in big detail, and the Cutter family in Kansas slaughtered. And it was a big story everywhere. And Dad explained to me why those 2 together created a alchemy that would murder. And he would immediately drop into stories about himself. So Dad handled autopsies, and his IQ tested really high. So in San Quentin, and he was young, and he was a veteran, just 1 year, and he was married. And his IQ was so high that the wardens and psychiatrists thought the kinds of prisoners that you never let out are stupid. There's no trade. And they got nobody wants them. So they're going to get out and they're going to do more crime. They're going to come back. But if you had a real high IQ, and no matter what the crime was, if you could convince the warden and psychiatrist that you were not going to repeat the crime, your chances went way up. So I said, Dad, what prisoner wouldn't say everything that you would expect them to say? And he said, most of them are idiots. They didn't do anything particularly to try to defend themselves. What are you going to do, Billy, if you get out? Well, I don't know. No one will hire me. Probably rob a liquor store. That's his parole visit, right? So in this scenario I'm giving you, prisoners that were transferred would come through where Dad worked. Yeah. He's near the warden, he's near the psychiatrist, and he's near the chief doctor where they do autopsies. And so these 2 prisoners came 3 days in a row to be checked out. They were being transferred to, I think, Bolton prison. But Dad observed them and listened to them. And so he went to the chief psychiatrist who believed in him and got him that great job, not cleaning urinals or breaking big rocks into little rocks. He had one of the primo jobs. And he said, those 2 prisoners, if you leave them together, they will kill. And the psychiatrist, like, you're in your 20s, come on. And I know you think you're a smart guy. I've been a psychiatrist for 30 years. I have a PhD, I have a medical degree. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
When they were transferred, one of them took the chains off his handcuffs and killed the driver. The other one killed one of the guards with his fist. They stole the car and they were captured like a day later.
Mm-hmm.
The psychiatrist came back to my dad and said, "How in the world?" He said, "I could tell the way they looked at each other. I could tell the way they spoke to each other. I could tell from their body language they were going to kill."
Yeah.
He became so trusted in the prison that he could go to the third floor. They call it the adjustment center. So when you and I were in college, maybe in a fraternity, that'd be a big joke. What is an adjustment center in a maximum security prison? It is a part of the prison where the prisoners are so frightening to the guards that they put them separate from other prisoners because they will kill at any chance. You hand them food, they'll grab your hand. And if they can smash your face and kill you, they will. This is a very, very dangerous place and a very dangerous prison. They trusted Dad to go up and bring messages back and forth. And he was one of the few prisoners they trusted. So anyway, we're driving along, bring my listener back to the reservation, the in cold blood murders. And Dad said, "Oh, I understand exactly why they committed those murders. By the way," and then he'd relay what he knew. And the next thing I knew, I'm hearing about the insides of San Quentin, what the murders talked about in the yard. So in a maximum security prison, probably in any prison, every prisoner is innocent. You just need to know that, Roy.
Yeah.
No one did anything.
No one committed the crime.
No, I mean, I have no idea why you locked me up.
Yeah.
But when they get in the yard, which is there where they have recess, where the maximum security prisoners use our version of the swing set, they sit around and talk about all the murders and robberies and things they got away with that they hadn't been caught. And of course, we know that once you have done any kind of high profile crimes, you've probably done 3 or 4 before you got caught. I mean, that's just a statistical fact. And if you've done something violent enough, 3 of the 4 come back again. So Dad understood all this. And if I ask him straight up, "Dad, why were you in San Quentin?" He would just scream it. But if you learn to listen to him and ask the next right question, he would tell you everything. So I became fascinated. I wanted to know everything. Because we're going to drive 200 miles today, and I'm going to try to entertain myself. And I learned how to bait him, to get him to tell me things. And I guess I basically learned why prisoners need Miranda rights. Because if you're really smart, like if I were a prison interrogator, you take the Miranda rights away, I will basically convict a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because you simply learn techniques to get somebody to say the next thing. And they say it before they know they said it. So I became the master of doing this with Dad. And as a result, I learned dozens of stories of inmates, his first night in the fish tank. And you're learning all this stuff, but it's insane stuff. It's stuff that no kid should be learning, talking about, or doing. And that became my world with Dad.
But at the time, is the fact that it's insane, do you understand that in hindsight? Or at the time, were you thinking, wow, this is insane? Or at the time, were you thinking, wow, this is actually pretty fucking cool? Because you're a young person. You're what, 11, 12?
You'd think it's pretty fucking cool because you're like, oh my God, my dad did this. He did this.
Especially if you're kind of isolated and you don't have the societal reference to what is normal. And if you're thinking, hey, this is what's normal. Maybe this is what every family or every dad does.
Well, and you're living on an Indian reservation. And if you live where I did today, it's still third world poverty where I live. I can take you, would love to do this, in fact, on what I call my Crowe book tours, to the very places I live and have you walk 10 or 15 minutes. You go, oh my God.
Yeah.
It's 100 years.
You wouldn't believe this is America.
Yeah, it's 100 years behind right now. So, and I go back to reservation all the time, by the way. So this isn't like I went back 20 years ago. Before COVID, I went 4 times a year and I'm going back in a month. I go all the time. My childhood Navajo friends, the ones that are still alive, most of them are dead, are still my best friends. And so I'm constantly there. So when we were in the reservation, we lived in a part, and you'll read it in the book, called Mud Flats. And Mud Flats is the lowest of the low of the low. Even the Navajo folks who live there don't want to live there.
Yeah.
So when you're in Mud Flats and your dad is the biggest guy in the world, and he's convinced everyone he's a Cherokee living on his sister reservation, he's not afraid of anybody. They're afraid of him. And you're this kind of puny guy that's getting the crap stomped out of him. You want to be like your big, strong Cherokee warrior dad.
Yeah.
And you look up to him. And every time you get your brains beat out, I come home, my face is black and blue, my glasses are broken for the umpteenth time. He'd say, "You need to learn to be a warrior, man. You need to fight." And he'd say, "Teach me to box." Well, first of all, some of the kids, many of the kids are 3 or 4 years older than you in the same grade. They grew up in hogans. They grew up in little tiny trailers. Their families don't speak English. Their families hate the school system for reasons I've explained. Yeah. They don't want to go to school. If they can reach 9th grade, they can leave. So you're talking about a really rough and a very insane place. And it's fairly lawless, if you know what I mean. So part of Dad's overall description, and Roy, I like how you started me as a kid here. So Dad would steal these tools, and he'd stand there. He'd say, "You know, David, this is really interesting. We stole all this land. We put them in a reservation. The Bureau of Indian Affairs gives them these tools. They don't pay them a lot of money to use them. We're stealing the tools back from the people that stole from them, and we're selling them again." You see, the entire world is an effing ripoff.
Yeah.
Everybody's robbing, stealing, murdering. CIA murders, the FBI murders, the military murders. They called it the Department of War. That didn't sound right, so it's defense. They still kill people. Cops kill people. People kill people. I'm just teaching you how to live.
So he would find justifications.
He's just saying, the whole world is a, cutthroat place. Do-gooders are either full of it, they hope to get something back from it, or they're scared of everybody and hope they won't get pounded. And he'd say things like, you fight every fight. Why do you do that? I said, because you'll hit me harder when I get home if I don't. And he said, "You're damn right. I won't raise a coward." And I said, the other part is, I know I have nowhere to run. We're not moving, as you've told me, but I'm not escaping. I'm not going to go visit with Billy in the next town for the weekend. There is no next town, and there is no Billy, and there is no nothing. You're just stuck. So I fought everybody who would fight me, and I stood up to it. And I watched the missionary kids run and hide, and the Indian kids just beat the daylights out of them. They had no respect for them. And I figured that out. And on one of my book tour events, this is, to me, hilarious. So I go to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I went all over the Southwest and did television and radio to promote my book. The Paleface Lie, by the way. And, anyway,
sure, quick plug.
I'm messing with you. So I get to a bookstore in Albuquerque, and it was publicized in advance, right? One of the columnists wrote the story. You got to read David Crowe's book. He lived a year in Albuquerque, grew up on the reservation. So one of my classmates, who's a full-blooded Pueblo Laguna Indian, sends me an email. "Are you the same David Crowe that I grew up with?" Yeah. He said, "I figured by now you're dead. I figured you got beaten to death by the Indian." I said, no, my face is misshapen. I no longer look like Brad Pitt, but no, I'm the same guy. And so I look more like Charles Bronson, and he said, "Well, when you get to Albuquerque and go to this book event, I want to show up." So I said, "Great, I'd love it." So he shows up, and we have a crowd. And he wants to hold court, and I'm going to let him, right? So he was the son of the Episcopal minister there. He was so afraid of the Navajo kids that his mother drove him door to door, which was less than a half mile.
Mm-hmm.
And every time he stepped out of the church compound, he got the crap stomped out of him. And he turned to me and he said, "You're as white as Elmer's glue. I don't give a damn how Indian you told your people you were. You're not like 6'5" and built like The Rock.
Yeah.
You're strong enough guy, but you're just a regular guy," which is true. And you walk back and forth to school slow. You fought every kid that would fight you, and you got even with everybody. And I never understood what made you tick. And I said, "Well, I want to be very respectful of you. You were nice to me, probably because you were even more beaten up than I was. But everything you did was wrong. Your mother drops you at school because you're afraid. Guess what?
Yeah.
Why didn't you wear a dress? At least it would have made more sense." I said, "You were afraid of them and you never fought back." I said, "They used you the way I use a golf ball on the driving range. I'm just going to pound the crap out of this." And I said, "You can't live like that." I couldn't live like that. And so I said, "But I respect you. You're a great guy. You were always good to me." But we had this debate in front of about 25 people, and their mouths just dropped. Like, "What made you fight back?" I said, "One, I was raised by the man who would kill you. Second, I'm not going to be a victim to anybody. No one's going to make me feel I'm not good enough because of my color, race. It's not going to happen."
Mm-hmm.
And I find in my adult life, it's been the single most helpful thing in my entire career as a lobbyist. It's like, I look at anybody and I don't think black, white, young, old. I just say, "Who are you?
Yeah.
Can I connect with you? If we can have a conversation, we can move to the next step. If we can't, we can't."
Mm-hmm.
But I look at everybody the same way. I didn't grow up with any prejudices of outside society. I mean, there are 1,000 nasty names to call an Indian that are the equivalent of the N word or the C word. I mean, we all know what those words are. But when I moved away from it, I had a lot of Jewish classmates. I had African American classmates. And so people would use all kinds of pejorative words about Jewish people. Well, it'd be like me saying, "Hey, Roy, you look like a mustard sandwich." Ha ha. And what does that even mean? I didn't understand any of it, right? But it became a great advantage because I wasn't held back by any of that.
Mm-hmm.
I was also raised by a criminal mastermind, so I could see 25 angles to everything. And as many birth defects and weird things. I can't hear out of my left ear. I'm dyslexic. It's nearly blind until LASIK surgery. But my imagination was on fire from day one. And it was all about, how am I going to connect, get through this, make this work for me? So I hope I'm not getting off on a tangent, but I use these skills to get me through life.
Yeah, no, definitely not. I mean, almost in a strange, deranged kind of way, the way your father, not that it was good in any way, shape, or form, but it allowed you to survive in the elements that he placed you. Where the other kid, it's it's street rules, it's prison rules, it's every movie you see, right, where the guy goes in prison, he, like, the first thing for him to survive is to stab someone, and that sends a message to everyone else: hey, don't fuck with this guy, he can kill someone, he's a serious guy. That is very applicable in this situation. Not that you should stab someone, but you should not bow down to people. You should not show people that you're afraid. And that, again, if you use that in a positive way and not in a criminal way, like your father did, that can actually serve you later on in life.
Roy, you're exactly right. And one of the things, Dad was so intelligent, and he could be fun when he wasn't mad at you, which was most of the time. Yeah. One of my goals was to get, Dad had 2 telltale signs before he twitched like he was electrocuted. One was a blood vessel that comes right here, and it would bulge like a garden hose, and his eyes bugged out like a Volkswagen. I called it the YV. And if that happened, as we both know, and I'll use, I think one of my funnier examples in the book, we're on the reservation and we're driving to a gas station. So sometimes my younger brother and sister would be with me. My older sister was 5 years older because of dad's prison time. She's born way before us. And she kind of got out of driving around with the little kids. So anytime we pulled up to a gas station reservation, we'd had to go to the bathroom for like 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not close to anything and you're out of gas. So, and reservation gas station, that's an interesting term of art. So we pull up to a rusted out trailer. It's got 2 pumps in dirt in front. And in front of this rusted out trailer is chicken wire with a black bear in it, an adult black bear. Jesus. And there's a piece of plywood warped, and this guy spray painted Black Bear Gas Station. And he was so bad at it, all the letters stripped from because he sprayed too much paint.
Yeah.
So we pull up, and my job was always to monitor Dad before he got in and out of a car. See, is he going to try to kill somebody? Is he going to try to kill us? Is he mad? And is he pissed off beyond belief? Right? Those are your. So we pull up in front of this gas station. There's a Navajo family in a truck, and there are 4 kids in the back of the truck, which, by the way, is not OSHA approved, right? And so there's a Navajo man and his wife and they're filling up their truck. So we pull up, and of course, those are the days where you couldn't go to the pump yourself. Somebody came out and stuck the pump in.
Yeah.
So this old Mexican man runs out and starts to stick the pump in the gas station. And I'm staring at Dad. And the YV is like, it's a garden hose about to burst. And the eyes would make a Volkswagen Beetle look like a flat car. And you're like, okay, what did it this time? What's going on? And then he started rolling up his sleeves.
Yeah.
Right. And he has built.
And you know it's going to go down.
Oh, you're thinking. And so the Navajo man, about 2 minutes into this, drove off with the hose still in the truck and just kept going. And so Dad goes and gets wire clippers, right? And his blood vessels are bulging out of his arms. So my brother and sister ran to the outhouse behind. Excuse me. And I run to them. I don't care if you pee down your leg, get back to the car. Yeah. So by the time I get there, he's got a good chunk of the wire off, and the bear's arm, one of his arms is all the way out. So the little Mexican man runs at me, runs at Dad, and Dad hits him in the face hard, smashes his nose, blood spurts out. Dad picks him up with one hand, holds him up to the bear cage next to the claw and says, if that bear is still here in 1 hour, he's going to eat your fat brown ass. And Dad threw him down. We drive off. He gets rid of us. He comes back. No bear, padlock on the station. It never reopens. Every day of my life, something like that happened. So he felt sorry for animals.
So yeah, that's a weird sort of justice that he has, right? On the one hand, he has empathy for this bear that's locked in a cage, as I think any normal human would have. But on the other hand, has no problem just randomly looking at people on the street thinking, I could murder you.
Exactly. So he loved animals. It was never an animal's fault. And to follow one more animal theme, and I think that I hope this is interesting to listeners. One of our days, probably the single most fascinating day I had with Dad as a child. 3 things happened in one day that could have, that were just incredible to me. Mm-hmm. So we're out stealing. And at one point, I think a truck is somebody who could get us arrested. So I throw 3 rocks and turns out to be a guy that just driving by slow. Dad beats the hell out of me for not properly understanding the lookout rule and saying, you overreacted. Of course, this guy's coming at us. He looks like a postage stamp with dust on him, because that's what any truck looks like in a desert.
Yeah.
And he was driving slow. So anyway, we get back in the car, and I'm trying to get Dad's head in a place where I don't want to beat the hell out of you the whole way home, which is a real long drive, right? So I'm tricking him into saying stuff, and I finally tricked him into telling me a couple of prisoner stories that were fascinating. But anyway, we get towards where we live. We went to Gallup, fenced the tools, and we're coming back to Fort Defiance, which is 26 miles away. You pass the Indian capital of Window Rock, still the Navajo Nation headquarters. And back in the day, there was a bar called the Navajo Inn. So Navajos can't drink on a reservation even now. Prohibition wasn't over for them till 1953. They came back from the war and couldn't even vote. These are code talker heroes. But anyway, the Navajo Inn had three really unique things. It's 800 miles from the reservation line. It's not in Arizona where all alcohol is forbidden for Indians. It's in New Mexico. And
I think Alaska as well.
It really is. There's a gold mine, right? It's a financial gold mine. It'd be like owning all the property around Central Park, 100%, right? You're just like, you can't fail.
Yeah.
So it was so notoriously a drunkard place that we had Navajo popsicles, and this is not my term, it's police term, where you're frozen and your lips are blue and you're stiff. You would pass 2 or 3 popsicles a day every time you drove by there. And the parking lot looked like 5,000 fraternity parties on speed. People are drunk, they're face down, they're beating each other. And so we pull around the Navajo Inn, and I always stared like, oh my God. And we came up to something called the Haystacks, and it's a smooth, beautiful round rock. And Dad was a safety officer, which is completely ironic.
Ironic, yeah.
I love that. Yeah. It'd be like Al Capone being, the alcohol.
Yeah, the czar.
And firearm leader, because he knows more about it than anybody. So we pull up, and there's a pickup truck that looks like an accordion.
Okay.
And I'm looking at it. I don't see anything other than another wreck. And it had Bureau of Indian Affairs license plates. Dad gets mad. Damn it, I have to investigate. It's a BIA vehicle. So we pull up, and the sun it's really bright, and it's sunny, and there's no trees around, and there's glare everywhere. And Dad says, "Don't get out of the car," which he rarely did. Right? Do not leave this car.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at the truck in the front, and in the cab, I see a body, a shirt, what looks like it's hunched over what was the steering wheel. I can't see a head. And I'm thinking it's a refraction, it's an optical trick. And there's a lot of that there, right? You see the road in waves, and the heat does all kinds of weird stuff. There's a reason mirages are in the desert, right? Mm-hmm. You see things that aren't. And I keep looking, and I'm like, that's weird. He looks like a scarecrow. So I'm 12. I get out. I run to the front of the truck, and there's a Navajo man's head, decapitated, and a long Indian braid.
Jesus.
And I immediately vomit. I just upchuck and shake, and my dad said, "God damn, I've told you not to get out of the car. You're a wimp. You're a little sissy. I knew you couldn't handle this. What the hell's wrong with you? No, you're not man enough to do anything." And I'm just like frozen. I can't move, and I can't look away. So Dad picks up the head by the ponytail, walks over to the cab of the truck. The windshield's completely smashed out. Puts the head in the front seat, what was the front seat, writes up his report, and says, "I'm going to turn this in after on Monday morning." So I'm completely freaked out. So we have one more stint to drive before we're home. And all at once we stop dead. I'm like, it's 100 degrees. I'm thirsty. You're always thirsty.
Yeah.
What the hell? And the car's fine. He gets the back of his car. He gets a little water jug, and he gets some beef jerky and he gets a shovel. And he walks out into the desert away from the road. And I follow him, and it's a coyote trap. So coyotes are considered the devil in Navajo. It's one of their symbols, but they kill sheep. And what do Navajos do for to earn money? They raise sheep.
Mm-hmm.
So they hate coyotes. Coyotes are predators. So Dad's explaining it's not the coyotes' fault. They're raised to eat sheep. This is how they live. He thinks it's wrong. So he gets to this trap. And it's just, I'm looking like, there's no way you're going to be able to lift that up. He gets a towel with one hand, puts it under the coyote's throat, and with his left hand, puts his foot, he opens that trap.
Wow.
And I'm watching muscles and blood vessels bulge. And of course, the coyote is scared and angry. So the towel around his throat's to stop him from biting.
Mm-hmm.
Dad says this coyote hadn't been there very long. His paw will heal. It's wrong for the Navajos to do this. The coyote's done nothing wrong. He puts water and jerky, and we slowly back away. The coyote drinks the water, eats the jerky, and limps off. And Dad stops me cold and explains, he said, do you understand where you're standing? I'm like, yeah, it looks hotter than hell. There's nobody around except this coyote, and he's now gone. He said, no, 5 million years ago, this was an ocean. 75 million years ago, there were dinosaurs. 50 million years ago, it carved the Grand Canyon. He takes me, and I'm not getting all this right, but he did. He's taking me through ecological time from 75 million years to now. And he turns to me and says, if you don't understand the earth, how it was created, where it was, where it is, if you don't read on the English literature greats, Tennyson, Bunyan, all of them, then you're no better off than that coyote. You're just a creature trying to survive. You've got to use your brain all the time. You need to read everything. When I ask you a question, you've got to be able to answer it, or you're no better. And you, by God, are going to measure up. You're a little wimp physically, but you seem smart enough. So you're either going to be smarter or stronger than me, or you ain't going to make it. We walk back to the car. We go home. Just before we get home, he reaches in his wallet and pulls out like $150. And that was real money back then. Mm-hmm. He doesn't give me any, of course, but he says, we had a damn good day. Let's go eat. A typical Saturday with my dad.
Yeah. It's the more you tell me about your dad, it's fascinating. On the one hand, very high IQ, seems like off the charts, and and
he's a smart guy.
Yeah, and not only that, an admiration for intelligence, for knowledge. Reads up on history, knows the land. And on the other hand, you would think that would translate into some sort of empathy, some sort of knowledge of, hey, it's not okay to beat my kids or to make them steal or to murder people. But on the other hand, there is empathy there. But it seems like, and this is just me hypothesizing. I don't know if this is
on point.
If this is true, both stories are him releasing these predators, and I don't know if he would do that, or maybe he did, or maybe he didn't with, let's say, a herbivore, right, like a sheep or a deer. I wonder if he felt like some kindred spirit with these type of more apex predators, and that's where the empathy comes from. Because with what he would call, right, a wimp or someone not, I don't know, worthy, there the empathy seemed to be lacking.
So, Roy, one, I'm just going to say to your listener, you're a very smart guy. I've thought about this for thousands of hours. I've been thinking about this from age 4. Mm-hmm. And I've had a lot of people ask me different versions, but most people miss this point entirely. So, in my dad's bifurcated genius, wounded animal, he built himself from nothing, right? He didn't have a great childhood. In fact, it was bad. Unfortunately, his goal, he said, was to make mine as bad as his, so I'd understand, which is an interesting thought. But here's a guy that could read physics books, and I'd say, Dad, I don't understand physics, math. Well, there's nothing to understand. It explains itself. But if you walk by him and maybe you looked at him funny or he thought you did, he'd hate your guts and want to kill you. So he could move from there to there. So I had a group of psychiatrists ask me to help teach a abnormal psychology class to PhD students. And they asked me a bunch of questions and they've thought about it. You asked it the best way I think I've ever heard it asked without being a PhD in abnormal psychology. And I said to them, what I'll say to our listeners, we really don't understand the human brain near as well as we think we do. If somebody has high innate intelligence, we respect that. Most of the time, that works. Just like, and I'm going to be sexist, most really gorgeous women have an easier time in life than a woman who weighs 400 pounds and is 5 feet tall. It's just life.
Yeah.
Better athlete, the better scholar, the better anything. So you think that they're going to pick up all of the same traits, like life's treating me good, I can treat life good. I'm not bitter and I'm not angry. But he was the exact opposite. So I hit a point where I didn't try to understand why, but I tried to understand how to reason with it. Because the why, I couldn't figure out the why to put in the missing piece that fixed him. But I could figure out, if I caught him before he was angry, how to stop him from doing something insane. Yeah. So I put all my energy there. And one abnormal psychiatry student, it was a very funny exchange. He was doing his internship in an orphanage. He said, these kids are really, they're angry. They don't trust anybody. They're nasty. I said, by the time I was 10, 99 kids out of 100 this kid is broken. This kid hates himself, doesn't know it. This kid hates his life, maybe knows it. This kid hates the people that he should be loving. You're trusting people you can't trust.
Yeah.
Some people can get past it. The man who wrote me in prison apparently could not. He finished the entire letter, the last 2 pages of his letter, of why I can't be a good parent when I get out of prison is because what his dad did to him before the age of 13.
Can you maybe expand on that? Because we talked about that before the recording. So maybe listeners don't know. Okay,
Roy, this is very interesting. I have a fairly sizable prison writing club. Prisoners write me, and this book has been in a lot of prisons.
Yeah.
And I answer every single letter. They don't email you. They write you handwritten letters and use a P.O. box because you'd never want them to show up at your door. But the letters are generally heartbreaking. I mean, a lot of them are really warm. Like, I just can't tell you how uplifting, and I can't wait to get out of prison. And but I get letters that really disturb me. The one letter that disturbed me the most, the guy that had read the book and praised the heck out of it, and the prison library was lending it out. So you feel gratification from this if you wrote a book about this, because your dad was a prisoner, you're reaching prisoners. But he wrote something that it caught me off guard and made me mad. He starts explaining, my dad beat me. I'm going like, yeah, I get it. My dad trained me to be a criminal. Oh, yeah, I get it. My dad was vicious. Yeah, I get that too. And so I have a life of crime, and I'm 35 years old. I'm in my 3rd stint in prison. I've got 2 children, an ex-wife, I think, whatever, because I haven't seen her in a long time. And I'm going to be the dad whose children do not forgive him on their deathbed because of what a bad dad he was.
Yeah.
So I wrote back and I said, I understand you've got 12 more years on this stint, and I understand you've had a hard life. But as a guy who had the same hard childhood you had, I'm not like making this up. I had what you had. I am completely flabbergasted and very disappointed in you that your lesson from this is that you're going to continue this behavior. And when you die, your kids are going to like either not go to the funeral and go, Jesus, that piece of garbage, it's my father.
Yeah.
I said, what you're going to do, think this through in your years ahead, is start making some really good decisions, get out of prison, support the woman who had your children, even if you don't like her financially, take care of those children and become a lesson in their life of how a life can change to be a positive thing. You're going to forgive your father. You're going to forgive your circumstances. You're going to forgive yourself. And you're going to become the man you never thought you could become. If you got nothing out of my book, that's my message. I didn't write the book to make money. 99% of us don't make any money.
Yeah.
I'm not James Mitchell. I'm not James Patterson. I'm not any of these people. I'm a first-time author with a first-time book. And unless you've got some real cool niche, you're Michelle Obama or, Joe Biden or Joe Biden, you're not going to make it. I didn't write the book for any other reason but to tell people who've been really in bad circumstances, stop being a victim, make great decisions, and believe in yourself and see life in a way different than the way you were raised. And so I'm profoundly disappointed in you. And if you don't change your mindset, will you please destroy my book and never mention my name? And don't tell anybody you got anything out of my book, because you didn't. You didn't get a damn thing out of my book.
Well, I mean, you're kind of a miracle in a way, right? The fact that you're not dead or in jail multiple times, but you've had a good career, successful author. You went against all odds. I mean, I guess, what do you attribute that to? Is it just your willingness to succeed, to right the wrong of your childhood, or have there been people around you that kind of acted as potentially moral compasses to help you out along the way?
Boy, I've got two answers. One, there's more people than you think that have overcome things that you can't imagine, and much worse than me. I'm no hero figure. But I think there's a nature-nurture thing. And I've told this to the abnormal psychology class. We don't know enough about the human brain. I think the Albert Einstein of psychiatry probably understands about 10 or 12% of the brain. We don't understand ourselves. We do things we wish we didn't. We don't tell people we did them. We're human. We do stupid stuff.
We fall.
The difference between good humans and bad humans, and I learned this after I married into a really fantastic family. It took me a while to figure that out. They make the same mistakes. I don't make the same mistakes. They don't rob gas stations and kill people, but they have ups and downs. They get mad. Mm-hmm. They always come back. And I think of my late mother-in-law, I just lost at 93. Her entire mantra is family first, no sarcasm, forgiveness, and we're all in this together. The person who's really broken in childhood, a lot of times your family's your enemy, and you just start, society's your enemy, and getting out of prison's your enemy, and it just never stops. If you're born without the empathy gene, and there's lots of evidence to show that double Y chromosome of prisoners or very low IQ, no fault of theirs. It could be from any number of things, brain injury, alcohol, fetal syndrome. They're going to have a hard time. You're not overly smart. You don't have any skills, and you've had the living crap beat out of you, and your psyche's broken. So the odds are that guy is going to struggle.
Yeah.
And if you let him out of prison, he's coming back to prison. I call it the Willy Horton syndrome. You spend all this time in prison for killing people. You get a weekend furlough because you've earned it. You kill 3 people that weekend and you're back. And the next guy you let out, starts a Sunday school, becomes a philanthropist, and is like the head of Big Brothers Big Sisters.
Yeah.
Why? We don't know. We don't know. And I hope the abnormal psychologist class will have me back next semester. But I basically said, I knew more at 10 than you'll know when you die.
Yeah.
I don't care if you went to Harvard, wherever. I'm telling you right now, you don't know.
Yeah.
And you don't know why a kid won't trust you. You don't know why a kid's afraid. You don't know what it's like to hate yourself. Now, maybe you've studied so many case studies you think you know, but this nature nurture thing is very tricky. My younger brother is the sweetest guy in the world. He's about 6'3", 210. I thought he would be dead 100 times before the age of 40. And he was beaten worse by my dad because he didn't figure out all my dad's games and tricks. And he walked into a lot of beatings that he could have avoided. But he's a sweetheart. And he's a step grandfather to 2 boys. He's a fantastic guy. Up to the age of 40, you would have bet your life he would have never made it to 41.
Yeah.
Wasn't mean, but alcohol and drugs and just, he came through this. And I'm like, he's the miracle. He doesn't want anybody to know his name and he doesn't want any attention. But we know 10 other guys we grew up with that are either dead or serving multiple prison sentences. When I went back to Mud Flats, my second part is I had 7 angels. And I mention them in my book, and they saved me. An 80-year-old Navajo woman came along when we first moved into the worst part of the reservation. Evelyn. She came across the street every day. She's the first person who showed me unconditional love. Her grandmother had walked back from the Long Walk Holocaust at age 4. Mm-hmm. She taught me what harmony and grace meant. In Navajo, it's Hazoni and Ajuba. They forgave. She forgave. She's the kindest human being. I told my mother-in-law on her deathbed, who I love tremendously, Evelyn and you are the 2 purest hearts I've ever known.
Yeah.
And they both are. And God rest both of their souls. Incredible. Evelyn loved me. She didn't want anything back. Evelyn taught me. When I would come home with my face mashed, she would say, I'm walking to school with you tomorrow. And I'd beat up those bullies. And I felt her love. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be all bad.
Yeah.
My second angel was a Marine code talker, World War II hero. And he was about as no nonsense as they come. But he wasn't mean. He was strict. He was stern. He was a pain in the butt. But he had a good heart and he meant well. When I say he's a pain in the butt, he called me on everything.
Yeah.
And his sons are my best friends today. But when I would do really outrageous crap, he'd say, look, you want to play on my baseball team? You want to be in my 4-H project where we sheared and sold sheep? You want to be in my yard? Then you're going to follow my rules. And his wife was even stricter. So they had 10 kids, 9 or 10 kids. I couldn't even count them all. They were poor, but they were honorable and honest, and they taught me. My third angel was an African-American coach in an all-white school in the eastern United States. And there were several racial things. And the day Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, I was in D.C. with an all-black high school competing. And this was before the King died that evening at about 70 in the east. And during that day, our all-white school ran against an all-black school. Their coach is white, our coach is black. And my only racism is Indians, Mexicans, and whites. I only knew one black person my whole life.
Yeah.
Right? They just weren't there. Mm-hmm. So I could tell my team was nervous. They got ready for the meet. They're nervous. They're upset. We get to we drive across the District of Columbia line from where I am, like, oh my God, there's like 100 years difference here. Not like the reservation, but it's bad. Hey, they're really poor people. And I can see the Capitol from here. I'm like, I don't understand. We get to that track meet and it's tense. There's fighting and trash talk, stuff I don't expect in a track meet, for God's sakes. And I sure as heck don't expect it where I'm now living and hating it because I don't understand any of these rich white people that I don't want to be around because I want to go back to the reservation. Anyway, during that meet, we had a lot of incidents, hitting, shoving, fighting. We're just a bunch of kids. And somebody stole one of our athletes' pair of shoes. And so we're calling them names. They're calling them names, getting a fight. My African-American coach puts us on the bus. closes the door, and gives me a lecture that I can recite to you verbatim.
Wow.
I raised you. I'm your coach, and you're not going to be on my team unless you show honor and grace and integrity. Anybody can steal anybody's shoes anywhere. You're a bunch of kids. You're responsible for yourself. This isn't about being black. This isn't about being white. This is about not taking the bait. This is about being the better man. You get your butts off this bus and apologize, or you're walking back. And I don't care if they fire me. Get off the bus. And a bunch of, we're not getting off the bus. No, fine. Walk. I don't care what you do. And don't ever show up to be on my team again. You're not going to be on my team. We all got off, apologized. We didn't want to. They weren't nice about it. They're kids.
Yeah.
We got back, and he gave us another lecture. Let me explain to you what it takes to be a man. It's all about honor. It's all about integrity. It's all about not reacting. He gives us this, and I mean, I wet my pants. I get home, and the news is Martin Luther King's assassinated, DC's burning, and we're staring at the news. So my dad had gotten a 6-month stint with the Bureau of Indian Affairs in DC before we went back to the reservation. So I'm temporarily in Washington, DC suburbs. He doesn't come home. The city's burning. You have the National Guard out for the first time since the Civil War. Of course, this year we had it'd be the third time.
Yeah.
Very unfortunate. Very awful. Anyway, Dad doesn't come home. Well, there's no cell phones. There's no internet. There's nothing. So my stepmother keeps calling the landline where he works. No answer. About 1:00 in the morning, read the book, guys. Read my book, because this chapter will make you all wet your pants. My dad comes home. I'm awake because I can't sleep. He tells my stepmother that 4 black men held him down, stuck a gun in his head, and said, steal this very expensive stereo and a car full of radios, and then get your honky ass home. And I'm listening to this, and I know Dad, right? Like, oh, this is great. This is such trumped up bullshit that I can't even believe you said it. Like, you're like, wow, this is the best lie ever, right? This is like you robbing a bank and telling them the bank robbers, the bank president set me up because he hates me. He put this mask on me. He
told me to steal.
He put all this money in this bag, and then he called the cops to set me up, right? So he goes through this scenario. So about a week later, I said, Dad, what happened? Well, I saw the looting and rioting. It was within a couple blocks. I walked over to what used to be Chinatown. They burned it to the ground, destroyed it for 30 years before it came back. He said, I went into a giant electronics shop, me and a bunch of looters. He said, men. I said, no, you looters. They aren't black or white. They're looters. Mm-hmm. This isn't about race. This is about stealing property because of chaos. Yeah. And he's like, well, you call it whatever you want. We're just getting even with the man. We all went in, took everything we wanted, waited till about midnight, got back in our cars, and drove home. And I said, well, why'd you do that? I wanted to stick it to the man. I've been screwed my whole life. I've been telling you about this since you were a little kid. My father beat me with the wet rope. We lived under a bridge. We didn't have anything to eat. He worked me from dawn to dusk picking cotton. He didn't let me go to school. And I said, and exactly what does that have to do with what you did last night? Well, everything. I have to get even. I have a sack full of revenge I need to get. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, on that day, Coach Chauncey Ford, one of the greatest men I've ever known in my life, and thank God, alive and well, and a guy I'm able to regularly communicate and thank. And he gets a whole chapter in my book, and he sells tons of books down in Orlando. Because people come up to him, are you the Chauncey Ford that David Crowe wrote about? Yeah. And when we talk, I say, you changed my life, Chauncey J. Ford. You taught me what it's like to be a man. Rex Coons, Code Talker, taught me what it's like to be a man. Evelyn Luna taught me what it's like to be human,
Yeah.
to love, to understand. Evelyn, Rex, and you made me see a different life. You created me because I was mad at you. Somebody slugged me when I ran the 2 mile. I hated him. You didn't hate him because you were Black. You hated him because you're 2 kids. There's tension, and it ain't Black and it ain't white.
Yeah.
It's that you're raised in different economies. You don't know each other. It's nonsense. I don't want you to ever act like that again. And he didn't scare me. He didn't hurt me. He hit the deepest nerve in my soul you can hit. He made me understand what it takes to be a responsible human being, how to not take advantage of somebody, how to show some empathy, and how to rise above it.
Yeah.
I love Chauncey Ford. I love Rex Kuntz. I love Evelyn. I had other angels after. But up till the age of 15, they formed my worldview. No, they didn't. My dad formed my worldview. They taught me there could be another one.
Yeah, they showed you another path. Earlier, you talked a little bit about your brother, and I feel like I want to talk about other than your dad. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about your dad, but the rest of the family. How many siblings did you have?
There's 4 of us. I have an older sister. My brother's 2 years younger, and a sister 5 years younger after that.
Okay.
Now, my siblings really don't want me talking about them, and I had to really get some understandings. When you write a book this brutal, my older sister swallowed a couple of bottles of acid. She wanted to kill herself because what Dad did to her, and that's no fun. So her niece, who actually works with me for me, read my sister the book 1 chapter at a time. My sister cried the entire way. At the end of it, she gave me a thumbs up. My older sister had vetoed any part of the book, it would have come out. I'm not going to do that to my older sister.
Yeah.
My younger brother and I, and we're very close now. I just spent a wonderful couple of days with him. But he was very angry when I wrote the book and said it was all lies. And it took me a while to understand, and then I did. So my younger brother, who is one of the most fun people you'd ever want to be around and very easygoing, and he's a sweetheart, really, very different than me, actually, which is a lot more like him. But Dad never told him anything. If you read the book, and again, you will read the book, listeners, there was an episode, there's 100 episodes, but if something my dad did really bad, he would tell everybody about it, right? And so you could never convince him, you have to keep this secret. So there was one incident where my dad and another man went into town of Gallup, and they were drunk out of their mind, and they got in fights, and they were trying to find women that were loose, and they dropped us kids off at a movie theater. And at the end of the night, they came back. Dad's friend had his brains beat out by some Navajo men in a parking lot, which I'm certain he richly deserved. And anyway, the weekend was a disaster. We sat out in front of the theater, freezing and winter night, no warm clothes, and it was horrible. And the next Monday, my brother told me the entire story of show and tell. Principal called my father. My father got called into the office. When my brother and I got home, my dad beat us, the hardest beating I ever had. I mean, I thought both of us were not going to ever walk again. I mean, he just didn't stop at the buckle end of that belt. But I learned something about my younger brother, and he's still this way. He's just an open book. He's just no reason to lie or to deceive. I mean, if you walked in a room and you're 50 pounds overweight, and he said, "How do I look in that shirt?" And he said, "Well, you're fat." And by the way, Roy, cut the beard. I mean, he wouldn't eat it. It hurt you. But so my dad never told
The beard's coming off. The beard's coming off.
Get that beard off, Roy. Your wife wants it off. I'm on your wife's side.
Yeah.
Now you look good in a beard, bud. No, but what happened is my father never told my brother anything. And my brother, even though he's a super bright guy, like anybody raised by a madman and a mentally ill woman, he's got his quirks and eccentricities, right? And so he never understood how much peril he put us in when you have a father like that. He didn't understand it. So Dad told me everything. And I was his confidant because I thought that was the best survival.
You were privy to more of the everyday doings, the inside information, what he was doing, how he was feeling, more than your siblings.
Let me put it this way. They knew 0.1%. When they read the book, they learned 1,000 things they didn't know.
Wow. Okay.
Because I didn't tell them and they didn't know. So my brother and I started into this. He said, well, I think you made everything up. And I said, all you have to do, book's not published, is call me on any date, incident, place, and it's out. And he said, well, I can't really do that. The whole thing's a lie. And I said, okay, I think I'm understanding you. Dad beat the living crap out of you every day of your life, called you stupid, and never trusted you and made you feel like the world's worst kid, even worse than me. So I said, let me ask you a question. Your middle name is Eddie, right? Yeah. Not Edgar, not Edwin, not any longer form of Ed. Edgar, Edwin, what else would there be? It's Eddie.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever wonder about that? Yeah. Eddie was the only guard in San Quentin nice to Dad. Dad didn't know his real name. He knew his Eddie. Eddie handed Dad a telegram telling him his wife had a daughter on Dad's 21st birthday. Eddie was friendly. He was the only one of the screws, which is what they call the guards. That's the nice name. And your name for Eddie, because Dad loved Eddie. My brother's like, are you sure? Yeah, I'm certain. And I did this to him on 20 different things. Do you know where you were on this date? Do you know what this house was? Do you know where? So I'm dyslexic as hell and barely made it to school, but I have a memory that about as good a memory.
You seem to have like photographic memory. Like you remember detail to detail.
Yeah, and if it wasn't for that, I'd be pumping gas and gallop. But my ability to remember, again, I can't do a lot of things, but I have a good memory.
Yeah.
And my publisher was so doubtful of the story. We spent 2 years fact checking, and she was meticulous. I'm like, that's fine. She even went so far. There's a big part of the book where I'm sitting in the garage in our house in Gallup, and we're listening to the car radio. It's the only radio that really worked, and we're listening to a prize fight between two fighters, Emil Griffith and a guy named Vinny the Kid Perret, middleweight championship of the world. And it was a big grudge match. Dad loved boxing, of course.
Yeah. And
Perret had called Griffith a faggot. And back in that day, or a queer, whatever it is, it just trash talk among fighters. Mm-hmm. And he slapped him on the butt with his hand and said, "You like boys." Well, this sent Dad through the roof. You don't insult another fighter. There's the code. You got to live up to the code. You're going to kill a man who does that. So during that fight, we're sitting there in the car listening. And the end of the fight, in fact, Griffith kills Perret. He hits him so hard so many times that the famous author and broadcaster Norman Mailer said, I've never seen a man hit so many times so hard ever. It was their third match, and the referee wanted to make sure with the whole 12 rounds. And so Perret's arms during the last round, he couldn't raise his arms. His eyes were closed. So what Griffith did was he pinned him against the ropes, and he would drill him into the face, and we'd bounce back, and he'd hit him again. And
Perret, use him like a punching bag.
He could never fall down. So when he hit the canvas, he was in a coma, and he never came out of it. He died.
Really?
Oh, God, yeah. Look that fight up. Griffith, Perret, probably 63. Horrible. Wow. So Dad is in the car swinging his fist. I was going to knock the windshield out. Kill that son of a bitch. Kill, 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 kill. And he's screaming. And so Mailer ended the fight by saying, I don't think Perret's going to ever become, I think he's dead. Mm-hmm. And of course, they're saying, well, Perret doesn't seem to be moving. No, yeah. And so Dad finishes by telling me this is the greatest fight that ever. He loved Dempsey. He loved Lewis. Muhammad Ali was just beginning as Cassius Clay. He loved the great fighters. But he loved a man who upheld the code. And when Perret officially died, Dad said, this is one of the greatest days of your life. You learned one of the greatest lessons a man can learn. And I said, you mean if you make a small insult to a guy and you kill him? You don't do that. It's the code. I've been teaching you the code. You understand the code. Yeah, I get the code. But anyway, so my publisher looked at this. She spent a month going through all 12 rounds, listening to every broadcaster. And she said, your version isn't exactly like. And I said, my version is what Dad and I shared listening to a radio.
Yeah.
But she was so skeptical. And I'm not making fun of you, Sandra. I love you. You did it. You made this into a much better book than it would have been. But you spent a month fact checking me.
Yeah.
And you did this to me on everything. And now you're Google Earthing every place because you can do that.
Yeah.
My point is this. I could prove everything in the book. I can't prove what a conversation was like on the way to Shiprock. I can't prove that Dad picked up that decapitated man by a ponytail. I can show you the report saying he was decapitated, but it all happened, right? And so one of my things is that I wanted a reader to get a very visceral and very real and very minute to minute of what I went through. And I get a lot of emails. You're a cretin. You're horrible. Why didn't you stop this? I'm human. He had me
because you're a child.
And he held on to me till my early 20s. He buried a body in West Virginia. That's a part of the book that will really get your readers like, woo. I didn't see a dead body. I know he was fencing tools in West Virginia when we moved east. And I think somebody double-crossed him, and he and some guys wound up killing him and burying him somewhere outside of Wheeling, West Virginia. And I was in college, and I was told to drive and pick up Dad. I knew there was blood on him, knew it wasn't a deer. I watched him bury something under a tree near an abandoned warehouse. You don't think you bury an animal out of fear somebody will find the animal. Anyway, we argued the entire way back. I tell him I'll never do anything. I tell him if I had any guts at all, I would turn him into the police. When we get back from the ride, he grabs me by the throat, squeezes my neck and say, I own you, boy. You'll do what I tell you to do, boy. And if you don't, I'll take you out, boy. And you're not telling anybody about this. And if you don't say yes now, you won't drive back to your college.
How many people, if you had to guess, how many people do you think he's killed?
How much is bullshit and how much did he do?
Yeah.
So the answer is I don't have an answer. But here's what I do know. Back to the David Crowe Miranda rights theory that you're lying to me about what you did and you're an inmate, right? And I ask you, did you kill anybody? Roy? No, I never did anything. And then I get you talking, right? Well, Ben, weren't you in a bar fight at the end of basic training in New Orleans? Yeah. Didn't somebody pop off and call you, faggot, okie? It doesn't matter. Didn't you tell me you took him behind the bar at about 2 a.m. and beat him to a point he didn't get up? You left. And the next day reported him as missing, then dead. But no one ever turned you in for it because it was a wild night in New Orleans. And didn't you, so you don't say that because you say, oh, no, that didn't, of course not. But what I would do to Dad, and I did it right up to the minute he died, by the way. His last year when I was his caretaker, I would trick him into saying things and to try to confirm stuff I knew. He's kind of at a point where he didn't remember everything, but he didn't lie anymore except about his own crime. If you ask him what got him into San Quentin, you never got a straight story. Anyway, one time I just said, Dad, we were talking about being tough. I said, remember that son of a bitch that popped off in New Orleans, called you a effing okie? You told him you're a Cherokee, he called you a damn engine. So, and he just got all worked up, right? And blood vessels are everywhere. The YV's going nuts. And he's screaming. He said, when I took that son of a bitch out back, I hit him so many times that I felt his skull crushed. That son of a bitch is never going to insult another Okie or a Cherokee ever again. No one knows who got him. He was reported as missing. No one gave a shit. I don't give a shit. He richly deserved what he got. Oh, okay. We'll move right along now. Yeah. So there were several times I could get him into a fever pitch where I believed it. But like he never left. He was in the last year of the draft, right? The kids born in 1927, most of them went to basic and came home before Japan surrendered. Yeah. And I checked this out. I did Freedom of Information on everything. Prison, the warden. I mean, I've spent years of research to make sure I knew before I ever thought to write the book, right? I even tracked down his cellmate, San Quentin, talked to his son, found out what happened to him, read all the newspapers. But when it came to how many he killed, the one he told me two things in moments of true lucidness. We're at the very end of his life, and he and I both knew it. And I said, Dad, do you have any regrets? And I said, I'm not picking on you, and I'm not, you didn't do anything wrong. You should never spend a minute in jail. And every son of a bitch had going. And he even chuckled at that. Yeah, yeah, I trained you well, boy. Yeah, you did. You did. I can say any of that bullshit with this totally straight thing. And he said, yeah, I do have some regrets. There are 2 or 3 guys I didn't get. God damn it, wish I got. And I laughed.
Those regrets.
And I said, Dad, you know what I love about you most? I said, it isn't your gentle nature. It isn't the fact that you're a do-gooder. It isn't the fact that you're a bleeding heart liberal. And he's wincing here. I said, it's the fact that you never regretted. He said, I had a sack full of revenge to get. Mm-hmm. And I never filled that sack. And I said, Dad, you could have been anything you wanted to be. You had an IQ I would cut my right arm off to have. You came out of World War II at a time when the entire world was America's oyster. You had every chance on earth. You could have been a doctor. You could have been a lawyer. You could have been a physicist. And that finally pissed him off. He said, God damn it, I was an Okie, Cherokee. I had nothing going. And, you get into the thing I wrote The Prisoner about. I can't be Roy Ben because Dad did this to me. I mean, bullshit. Yeah. But back to your earlier question, why the empathy? What he felt broken enough at a young enough point and had just enough lack of empathy, whatever that point is. I don't have any idea on a bell curve where it would be, that he couldn't overcome it. So he couldn't help being smart. He was smart. He could read stuff. His dad died without reading or writing a single word of English. Dad died when he was 12. And I think this is my take, and I may not be right, but I think 99% right. His dad was the 7th of 12 on a farm in Texas, and he was dyslexic. So I took him to school. He couldn't figure it out. And one thing we know about dyslexia, it's a brain confusion. You don't figure it out fast. You got lots of brain, but as a child, you're learning ABC, 1, 2, 3. You're not going to learn on time. You're disorganized. It's a very big problem. Anybody dyslexic, maybe now it's better, but by the time you hit 6th grade, you think you're the stupidest human being that ever lived because everybody can do stuff you can't. Yeah. I would go up and write my name on the board, and even the Navajo kids would laugh because the D and the B would be backwards because I couldn't never write a D for David. I would turn it like a B. Yeah. And so, you just
like Russian.
Yeah. And when the Russians published my book, and they did, and it's now doing well there, I figured, you believe that?
That's perfect. You close the loop. Yeah.
You can buy my book in Cyrillic, in Kindle, hardback, paperback, and you can listen to it in an audiobook if you're a Russian.
Why specifically Russia? Like out of all the different languages.
I think they understand misery as good as any country in the world. And my book was great about misery. But I kind of got off point there. What I was going to say, so at the end of Dad's life, and we're talking about murders, he never saw it as murder, Roy. And here's the thing about any criminal, I think, that's done something violent. And I just got a letter from a guy that I'm not going to answer.
Mm-hmm.
He was 15 and he murdered his father as a police sergeant, and he used 2 different guns. He wrote me a 19-page letter why he's innocent. He's now been in prison 20 odd years and wants to know if I'll help him. And I'm like, I have nothing. I can't help you because I know no more about your crime than what I read.
Mm-hmm.
But what fascinated me about his letter was what I understood about Dad and all those prisoners. I'm in jail for murder, but let me give you 19 pages on why it wasn't. My dad beat me. I didn't have empathy. I didn't do it. Somebody stuck the gun in my hand. Everybody revered him, but he was the biggest dictator, SOB on earth at home. No one loved me. And by the time you're through, you're like, you've spent 100 ways of telling me why you didn't do what you did. And if you did, you weren't guilty anyway. Like O.J. Simpson wrote, if I did it,
yeah,
did it. Right. But you have to understand, I think, the mind of a violent criminal won't answer an honest question because they don't see it as an honest question.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, Emil Griffith killed Benny Perrette in the ring because the son of a bitch had it coming. That's the answer. And of course, it was in the ring. He didn't get charged with anything. And his dad said, everything I did, every guy I killed deserved it. If I'd been in the ring, I would have been the gold medalist. I would have been a prize. I would have been got a lot of money and been on Ring Magazine.
Yeah. I think most people find a justification for doing wrong, from murderers to dictators to name whatever cause it is and whatever issue it is. I don't think most people look in the mirror in the morning and say to themselves, I'm a bad person. I'm horrible. I can't believe I do it. It's no, like, I find a justification to why this is needed because, or I do this because otherwise you wouldn't be able to live with yourself.
You're exactly right. One of, I think it was in Dale Carnegie's book. I used to read all kinds of self-help books. I still do, and I like them.
Dale is good. Dale Carnegie's good.
You know, some of them help me, some of them don't. Some of them are too, write yourself a letter as a child saying, I love you. And it's like, I don't know. But one of Al Capone's top guys, and I won't remember the name, but he was a very big deal. He was trapped in a hotel room in Chicago, and he was in a shootout. And there's, he was going to go to jail for like 1 million years. So he's wounded and barricaded, and he wrote a letter. And I'll find this.
I think I read that. I think this is in Dale Carnegie's book, right?
It is in Carnegie's book. And Carnegie wrote so many good books. But here's the letter he wrote. I'm surrounded. I'm wounded. They're going to kill me. And I don't understand. Men need a woman to sleep with. Sometimes their wives aren't nice to them, or sometimes they're not married. There's nothing wrong with a man loving a woman. Alcohol is good for people. We're in a depression. Life is horrible. A man needs a drink, and he needs to have a drink in the privacy of someplace where they're not chasing him down, calling him a criminal. A man wants to have a card game. He wants to make bets on these things. Why are we denying a man a drink, a poke, and a game? And why am I a bad guy? All I'm doing is giving the people what they want. Mm-hmm. That is the first thing anyone needs to understand about anybody who's a serious criminal and what you have to do to untangle it. One of the really interesting things that happened to me along the way that I never expected is I talked my way into a tour of San Quentin. Your average guy cannot say, I want a tour of San Quentin. It won't happen.
Yeah.
But I wrote the public relations guy and said, look, my dad was in San Quentin. You can look it up. And, he almost got sparky, almost got the electric chair. The guy had 5 more minutes, he would have bled out. The guy's wife found him. Otherwise, it's premeditated murder. So the guy got on my side. I said, yeah, come to San Francisco, and I'll work you in with a group of psychiatric patients who study prisoners. Mm-hmm. So they worked me in, and it was one of the most interesting things. First, you have to sign a thing saying, if I'm held hostage or killed, it's on me. You can only wear certain clothes. And if you're dead, you're dead. Sign this.
Yeah.
And
we take no responsibility.
Zero. And let your family know they can recover your body and do whatever they want with it. But we're not even going to do that for you. Mm-hmm. So I did that. Because if you're raised like me, you have to know. Or if you're crazy like me, you have to know. So during that day, several interesting things. First, I found out Dad was right about the guards, the screws. Scott Peterson, the guy that killed his wife and unborn baby, who's famous. One of the psychiatric patients said, why don't you just kill Scott Peterson? Well, I want to every day of my life, but I need my pension. So being David Crowe, I said, you are a useless effing son of a bitch. And the entire group, I said, you, sir, were hired by the state of California to follow the rule of law. You are not the judge, you're not the jury, and you're not the sentencer. Yep. You are only responsible for the safety and security of the prisoners inside. You have no right to do what you want to do. You have no right to say what you did. I see you as the fucking scum of the earth. And I just want to call you out on this. You are a pig. My dad was right. You're actually no better than the people you guard, maybe worse. And I mean, the entire crowd stepped away from me. But I'm like, screw you. You're not killing Scott Peter. I mean, who do you think you are? Right? You're a thug. You're a fat thug who wants to get in his 30 years. And I said, I had no idea how right my dad was about prison guards until I met you. Thank you for clearing this up for me.
Wow.
And I said, and if you want to do something or legally or say something when we get out, I'm fine with that. But I'm disgusted off the charts.
Why do you think that hit you so deep?
Because Dad always talked about how the guards were brutal and how they let men who were convicted of bad crimes be raped and murdered and bashed and didn't do a thing. And how the guards had their own system for protecting homosexuality, drugs, gangs. That the internal justice in a prison made everything in the worst part of society look like a cakewalk. That the worst thugs on earth and the worst justice in the world is inside the halls of justice. And he and in that sense, he was a liberal. There was a prisoner who he was roomed with, cellmate with, who was from Australia. And he was like one of these really good looking guys. And he was a handyman. And he worked in Los Angeles in a ritzy area. And he was a landscaper for this family. And so, long story short, the woman of the house and he have an affair because he's felt like Schwarzenegger in his prime, and she's bored and she's lonely. And so they had a real, an ongoing affair for a long time. So one day the husband comes home early and catches them. She's reached a point where she never thinks she's going to get caught. She says, rape, rape, rape. This man raped me. Get him off me. And so what happened was, I'm sure the husband knew that was BS, but this guy goes to trial. And he's not well educated, can't afford a lawyer. He's got a court, appointed lawyer, some kid that three days out of law school, wet behind the ears. And they say, well, you've been accused of rape by a very responsible woman who's the wife of a very senior executive who's never even been arrested for jaywalking. So I'm believing you over her. Why? And this poor guy, he said, she's got a mole next to her left nipple. She's got a birthmark on her right cheek that's red. Her middle name is Elaine. She's the third of 4 kids. She married a wealthy Jewish lawyer for security. They don't love each other. They have 2 kids. And he told her life story. And the judge said, guilty. He served 20 years in the queue.
Jesus.
Now, Dad could tell you 100 stories like that. And the one thing he'd tell you is if you're Black, if you're poor, if you're not well educated, if you didn't have a trade, you're screwed. You're done. If you're white and you have a good lawyer, you have a good IQ, or Black or anything else, but
it's usually money. If you have money,
and you can
get
anything.
away. Yeah, you can get
And
away
that's
with a lot.
the justice system is the most unfair thing on earth. He said it's far more unfair in the street. And if you get out, you're just 10 times meaner. So the last part of the day, the last 2 things, and I really want our listeners to hear this. We talked to 6 men that had been up for parole for decades. All of them had committed a murder in their teens. And I'm 68, and all of them were at least as old as I am. This is about 10 years ago I did this. And the reason prisoners don't get paroled quickly for crimes like that is obvious. But in the old days, parole boards did it, and then it became governors. So if you want to look at why governors don't parole people, Governor Michael Dukakis of Massachusetts gave Willy Horton a 3-day parole, and he murdered a family of 3 the weekend he got out, and he never lived it down.
Yeah.
Had a ordinary parole board done that, it would have been a tragic mistake. But so governors don't issue paroles, and no matter how many years you're there, they don't want to because there's nothing in it for them. So these guys are explaining to me that they committed murders, one of them 45 years earlier. One had been up for parole like 38 times. By the way, Sirhan, the guy that killed Robert F. Kennedy, still there. Has been up for parole since 1970, whatever. He'll never get paroled for obvious reasons. But these guys are explaining to me. He said, the first 10 times I went to the parole board, I explained why it wasn't my fault. You know, I was poor, I was desperate, I was, whatever. He said, the last 5 or 6 years, I went to the parole board and said, I was completely guilty. It was premeditated murder.
Yeah.
I had hate in my heart, and I deserved what I got. I'm profoundly sorry, and I'm a different man. And if the parole board or jury really believes that, you have a chance. But most prisoners will say it way before they believe it themselves. My last thing of the day was with the warden. And I told the warden my story, and he looked at me and he said, David Crowe, 3 out of 4 men who were raised by a father like you would be in the cell next to their dad.
Yeah.
Consider yourself a great success, and God bless you. And I'm glad we gave you this stay at our prison. And I hope you found it informative. Don't ever come back. We're done. I'm glad we played this little thing with you.
Yeah.
You've had a fun day. Beat it.
Yeah.
And I said, before you say that, you did me the greatest favor of my life. I looked at cell block 1440E, where my dad was. I looked at the murals on the wall where he ate. I looked at Sparky, where he would have been executed. I looked inside where your office is. I didn't see your office, and I know where he worked. You've given me a piece of life I could never have. But you have to understand something, Mr. Warden. When the warden before you, 8 wardens before, let him out, you let out the meanest son of a bitch on earth, and he beat me within an inch of his life, and he wasn't rehabilitated even a teeny bit. And he said, I've looked, he had a high IQ, he's married, he's a veteran. Somebody lent him enough money to get a good lawyer. And he got off because he convinced us he deserved a second chance. And I said, but I just talked to 6 guys. They've been here for 40, 50 years. least 30. And most of them are going to go out the back door, which is the prisoner's way of saying they're going to die there.
Yeah.
Every one of them's a better man than my dad was. Get out of here in 5. Think about that. Thank you, sir. I'm walking.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I want to switch up a little bit just because I just realized we didn't really talk about your mother and the relationship that she had with your father and the relationship that she had with you. So I want to make sure that we touch upon that a little bit as well.
Sure. It's very, very painful. I mean,
if you don't want to talk about it, it's
no. I wrote about it. You can ask me anything. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
I'm not here to cherry pick what makes me look good or feel better.
Actually, before you answer this question, has it been cathartic or therapeutic, both writing the book and then, consequently with all the interviews afterwards and stuff like that, podcasts that you've been on talking about it, reliving it? Or is it sometimes painful and you have mixed emotions about it?
Boy, you're a great questioner. The catharsis happened when I had the guts to write the book.
Okay.
The catharsis ended when I was able to finish it and say, this is the book. I've had other people ask me, and in fact, I have to go talk to people. And a woman who just broke down and cried at a writing conference I was at. She held me my book. She had 20 pages where she tabbed it. She said, I have 100 underlines. I got to write this book and you're going to help me. And I said, you can't write the book till you've recovered from. You're not a victim. I don't feel sorry for you. I don't care. There's 1,000 people in a worse place than you are.
Yeah.
There's 10,000 in a worse place than me. What's your message? What's your story? And what are we leaving our reader? Because there's some crack baby right now in a ghetto, and a man's hit that baby with a lead pipe, killed the unborn child in the mom's womb, raped her, and then put a gun and blew her head out. Do you have a better story than that? This is not about, I went through worse than you did. So that long-winded way is the catharsis is, what has my life been? What have I learned? What can I give a reader, whether they've been through trauma or not, a message that makes sense? Right? One of the things I struggled with in my 20s and 30s particularly, I would read these self-help books. Nothing's your fault. Write yourself a letter when you were a child. Love yourself. Do a self-hug. And you're like, puke, bullshit. This is crap.
Yeah.
Whoever's writing this stuff and making money is worse than making money being a weatherman. They're never right.
Well, it's the biggest category in books. Self-help is the biggest category. It's the biggest seller. Right. So that's why so many people get into that.
And some of it's good. Lori Gottlieb, who's one of my heroes, wrote an incredible book. I think it's called Someone Should Speak to You or something. and they're well-meaning. I mean, I'm no expert. I'm not writing any self-help books, just so you know. But
a lot of them are crap.
But what they don't do, here's my cathartic moment. Here's the bottleneck between the mess I was and the lesser of a mess I still am. Because I still have it just doesn't go away. It just gets better.
Yeah.
But when I had gone through very miserable divorce with kids and just very unhappy with myself. And I never really separated out what happened to me and who I was, right? It's like somebody poured 5 colors of paint in a bucket. You're supposed to have 5 segregated pieces, which is what you call your psyche, right? But for those who are really a mess, everything bleeds into everything. And, you speak to your child a little bit harshly and they cry and you remember your dad beating you nearly to death and your kid's so confused. I mean, my kids have to be so confused. I've tried to apologize 1,000 times. I didn't have my stuff sorted out when I had you. I hope you forgive me. And I never mean to them, but I was completely inconsistent, weird, they paid that price.
Yeah.
And so the thing that I learned was you can read every self-help book in the world, but it's like writing a great book. If I can get you to be me in that book, if I can put you in the book and you're turning every page and you can't wait till it ends, I've written a great book. But if I say, Roy, imagine if you were raised by this violent man. Imagine yourself living on an Indian base. Imagine yourself being told you're Cherokee. You're like, well, none of that happened. And I've got a great imagination, but I'm sorry, I just can't do that. Or I can't do it in a way that gets through my internal bullshit meter. Because your internal bullshit meter is the most powerful thing in your life. Some call it soul, some call it conscience, call it whatever you want. But you've got a thing in you that knows if there's a lie or a truth, and knows if you're being played. And even if you think you don't, you do. And even if you don't listen to it, you do. So I would go back to a house in Gallup, New Mexico that had a piece of trauma that I knew broke me, that I knew I hadn't healed. And this is 45 years later. I had a little bit of time to think about this.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So every time, as a lobbyist with clients in all 50 states, I get to fly anywhere I want all the time before COVID. And I would always stop off, rent a car, go to Gallup, go to the reservation. So I've probably done that 100 times or more during my career. I'd say more than that, right? Just all the time. Look up people, write stuff down, look at my old journals from when I was a kid. Never think I'd write the book, but always immersed. They say childhood is a city you can never leave. Gallup.
I love that quote.
I do too. Gallup, New Mexico was a town I could never leave. But in the house on 306 South Cliff Street, buy the book and remember 306 South Cliff Street. No, but what happened in that house is a handful of things. My sister tried to commit suicide. My dad abandoned my mom, left her with no money, no food, no electricity, rent wasn't paid, a broken down car, cut her brake lining so she'd be killed when she drove. Gallup's a very hilly place. It's a coal basin. In that house on my 10th birthday, my dad said on my 10th birthday, actually it was 2 days after the weekend, we have to go talk. So he took me off into away from town. And he said, we're going to leave your mom soon. You're the only child of the four not on board. And defend my siblings, they just had as much as they could take of this. And it was clear he was going to kill her if she stayed. I mean, there's nothing that could come of us staying together as a family. Yeah. And we had done horrible things in that house to her. We'd thrown things at each other. Yeah, he had broken the family down so we were nothing more than a gang. It wasn't long after I read Lord of the Flies and said, hell, I could have written a much better book than this. No disrespect for Lord of the Flies. But Dad took me out in the hills. He said, we're getting rid of her soon. I'm going to come to your school, take you, and we're done. I said, no, Dad, you can't. So he, bam, slapped me in the face hard, wrung my head, and he said, God damn it, you're going, and that's it, and it's going to happen real soon. You shut your goddamn mouth. This is going to happen, and the other three are going to go along, and so are you. You understand that? So I cried the whole way back. I walk in the house. My mom has thrown a surprise 10th birthday party for me. It split my head in half.
Yeah.
I broke into tears. I cried so hard. And of course, my mom, I was the happiest kid in the world. It's the first time anybody had ever thrown a party for me. The girl I had a big crush on, who unfortunately liked Joey better, the bastard, was there. And Joey was there. And all my buddies on my Little League baseball team, and they're all there. And they give me toys, right? They're like, there was cake, there was balloons. The cake had Roy Rogers on it. Can you get over that? Roy Rogers and icing. It's like, for that day, but it wasn't for me. Yeah. There was none of that. I hated that party. I wanted out of that party the second it started. When the last kid left, I hugged my mom. walked out of the house and I ran. These are exaggerations. I was 10. I ran so far out of Gallup, I couldn't see Gallup. But Gallup's not a big place.
Yeah.
And then I probably ran for close to an hour and then ran for close to an hour back until I was so exhausted that I couldn't move. And I cried and cried, and the memory never left me. So I'm sitting in front of this house in Gallup, New Mexico at age 55, 53, 54, right in there. And I'm meeting my wife, who I wish I'd met when I was young. She's great. But I knew I had a final chance to come clean about who I am. I never told anybody. Bits and pieces. Nobody knew my story, and I was ashamed. And I felt guilty. And I felt embarrassed. And I felt it was my fault. Those are the 4 reasons I wrote this book. And I also understood that you have to get past it. Most people can't. So I'd sat in front of the house all through the years like 100 times, always in a different rental car, just staring at that house. I could never quite put my hands around why that house and why I couldn't get past it. So one day, this is in the book, guy runs out of the house and pounds on the window and says, "Who are you? You some kind of weird stalker. You keep doing this. I've seen you here over the years many, many times. Why do you sit here and stare at my house? What are you trying to do to me?" I say, I lived in this house. No, you didn't. I've owned this house for 45 years. I raised my family. They're all old. My wife died. I'm a widower. And he said, I bought this house after some family of 4 people left it. And I said, well, we were that family. Well, the kid was like this big. I said, it's been 45 years.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't believe you. I don't believe a word you've said. And I said, stand there for a minute. When you walk into the garage, there's a crack in the cement on the left side that goes about 10 feet and then it turns left. When you turn the door, it's cracked on the bottom. And when you turn in, there's black and green tile and it's chipped all the way through. There's a rust stain on the pipe next to the little bathroom. And there's a wooden, like built-in basket made out of some kind of cheap pine. When you walk up the stairs, the 3rd step from the top creaks unless you've replaced it. The tile is this color linoleum. He said, come in. Either you're the most fantastic liar in the world or you're that boy. I walked into that house and I looked into the living room on the left corner, and it's where I found my mom in a fetal position with the look of complete hopelessness, which I never understood till that minute. And she saw me and she ran and screamed and cried and hugged me. You're my oldest boy. You can never leave me. I have nothing. I have no one. My dad came in the house behind me because he found us. He smashed her to the ground, grabbed me by the throat, took me in the car, called me a coward, a wimp, said, you're not much of a man. You'll never be one. You're an absolute nothing. He hit me and my head hit the window. I didn't feel anything. I was in a complete nervous breakdown. Till that day in that house with that man was a nice man, retired city worker in the city of Gallup. I had never told anybody that story. I spoke to him for 12 straight hours. He fed me. Next morning, I got up and called my father, and he answered one ring. You ever feel bad about what you did to me? F you, you son of a bitch, you revisionist bastard. Don't you make this crap up. Who do you think you are? I told you wouldn't be much of a man. You're not much of a man. You will never be much of a man. Cut the revisionist crap. And he slammed the phone down. At that moment, I forgave him. You're like, what? He could never be anything than what he was. But that's not me. And I don't have to be that. I'm not that. I didn't do that to anybody. I wouldn't do that. In fact, most people have taken advantage of me because I'm so ashamed of anything that if you make me feel bad about myself, I'll give you everything on me. But then I called my mom. I said, Mom, and you got a two very, very mentally ill, still alive at 90. Just saw her, in fact. Very mentally ill. I said, Mom, did it bother you that you made me feel like I abandoned you, that I was supposed to be head of the house? And she said, you have a lot to feel bad about. You were my oldest boy. You left me. You didn't protect me. Your daddy tried to kill me. I went homeless. You weren't there then. You're not there now. You have a lot of guilt to feel bad about. I'm glad you called me to talk to me about this because you should feel really bad. I said, I'm not calling you to tell you I feel really bad. I'm calling you to ask you if you feel really bad for doing that to me. Mm-hmm. She said, well, no, you have it all wrong. You had it right the first time because you called to tell me how sorry you are for abandoning me and leaving me and deserting me and that you've never been a son to me. And in college, there was an incident where she mailed every picture back. And it caught me completely off guard. She mailed it to my stepmother, said, I am no longer your mother. And I cried for 36 hours. I just could not stop. And take these. I want nothing to do with you forever. I am not your mother. I said, did you ever feel bad about that? No. You were the one that was wrong. You know you are. That's why you called. Put the phone down. I'm like, wow, I can buy into this endless line of bullshit.
Yeah.
Didn't kill enough, didn't love enough, where I can decide this isn't me. From that day on, I healed. I began to heal. And every day got better.
So none of them, both your parents, none of them ever took any responsibility. They essentially, it's almost a classic case of people should get a license or go through a test before they are parents. Like not everyone should be a parent.
A lot of people shouldn't.
Yeah, and but they never grew. A lot of parents make not these type of mistakes, but mistakes during on and later on in life. They realize it, and they make amends with their children. But not here. At no point did they realize, you know what, we actually fucked up. We did a lot of bad stuff. We didn't raise you right. It was just like, no, this is us, and we're not apologizing for it. And you are, in fact, the one that's wrong.
Yes, Roy.
Wow.
What they told me was, you were 100% wrong. You did everything wrong. You're still wrong. You were a bad kid. You're a bad man, and you'll die a bad person because everything you did that should have been done to help us was not done. And this is where your reader, your listener, your whatever, when you can look at your own life experience, if you've had a bunch of bad things, and everybody's had something.
Yeah.
But when you forgive yourself, and these emails piss me off. I can't, my publicist won't let me answer emails that are like people say, you're a horrible person. You should be arrested. And I sent the first back. You're absolutely right. Bring the handcuffs. I'm waiting for you. Like, no, you can't do that. No.
So you get, some of the, I'm assuming I don't know what the split is, but I'm assuming some reactions are, wow, this is an amazing story. Thank you for sharing. And then some are this.
I've got Amazon and Goodreads. So people who do verbal road rage do it through reviews.
Yeah.
And believe me, they are vicious. I have about 10 reviews where I go, whoa. But no, my publicist and publisher are good people, say you don't answer any of it. Mm-hmm. Respond to positive things. Like I had an 8-year-old she's 6th grade, write me a letter and say, I loved your book and my family read it. And write a letter back to I'm going to read it to my class. 98% are those, or I really admire you, or God bless you, or thank you for helping me understand something. But 2% are the most vicious things you've ever read. And you just got to understand that, right? Yeah. And so what I started doing was reading rejection letters for Patterson, Baldacci, anybody that you admire. And it's like, this is such shit. I can't believe I can't believe it. It didn't drip off the page and fall in a soup. And you're like, whoa. So yeah, you get a lot of that. But the one thing I get that I don't understand, I get that people want to be more important than you. And if you're in a place that I envy or I don't think you deserved it, you're too good looking. You were raised with money. You have something I can't have, and you don't deserve it. And I write you a letter. I hate you, Roy. You know, you got all these things. You son of a bitch. Like, okay, I get it. But the ones that I can't understand is you learn nothing from your experience. You think it was funny to be mean to people. You think it was funny to be raised by a prisoner. The only reason you did anything good is you thought that it would give you good. You did good, became a do-gooder so that you would have people that take care of you. You know, you didn't learn anything. You're a bad guy. There's no epiphany here. There's no any like kumbaya. I get it. And I want to say back, but I can't. I don't answer. Is either you didn't read the book I wrote or you're not understanding me. I told you everything I did wrong. And there's a lot of things I am not proud of. And like people came to me and said, wow, I knew you during the West Virginia thing. Like, oh, my clouds. I had no idea. Yeah. Well, you were never going to have an idea. Believe me. But I wrote that. And then I wrote how it came out for me. But I am no Prince Charming. It's farthest thing from perfect anybody you've ever met. I have a good heart and I want good for people. And I'm not a racist and I'm not a bigot. And I try to help. I've had 300 college interns in my firm. I give to homeless shelters. I work with Big Brothers Big Sisters. I do my best. But I definitely understand what I did wrong. I completely get what was done wrong to me and how I learned so slowly. And I completely get that unless you find a way to forgive yourself and those who did this, you can't get to the next step. So a David Crowe self-help book would be a lot of what's bothering you, you don't understand. It's there. And if you look, you'll find it. Mm-hmm. You have the answer. But you have to find yourself in an example that you can relate to. That man in that house in Gallup, I walked in and saw my mother at age 10. In 3 dimensions, my entire life came back to me. And I knew that the moment my mom was in the fetal position, got up and my dad hit her, he put me in the car and hit me, and I didn't feel it. That was the break point. Now, maybe a lot of people won't know the exact break point, but they'll know the break time period. Right? My sister tried to kill herself. The 10th birthday party, mom had come out of a psychiatric place for 2 weeks, and dad tried to dump her, but they, can't do that, shouldn't do that. There was a bunch of things, but that moment broke me. I tried to unbreak myself and repair from that moment. The call to both parents, which they could have easily been dead, there could have been no peace, or they could have answered in a different way. Like, Dad, I'm really sorry about the dad I was. I went, well, but no, it's F you son of a bitch. And no, it's all your fault, son, because you were the man.
Yeah.
Really? 6th grade. You could have cut papers and, I delivered papers and cut grass. Well, I did that. That was worth a whopping enough to go to the cheap movie theater and buy a candy bar. But when I saw that they didn't forgive, what I understood is they never forgave themselves or their parents or their life circumstances or anything that had happened. And the people who are stuck in these places, in the David Crowe self-help book, are the equivalent of sitting in a bathtub where they never drain the water. And the water, it just keeps circulating, and the dirt ring gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And they'll say, well, I'm cleaning myself because there's water here. Well, you're not. You're redistributing the dirt. And what you have to do is climb out of the tub, look at the tub, and decide that you don't have to be a creature of that tub. You have to understand that you didn't do this, that all the guilt, the shame, the regret was your way, your brain's way of trying to cope, compensate, and get through this. But what it created was a broken mirror of who you are. And the only way to fix that is to step out of it. Forgive who did it to you. They can't do better. My cat's meowing at me right now because he wants to be fed. He can't help it. He's a cat. Any time after noon, he's hungry. I'm not mad at him. And I'm not mad at my dad. Now, I know it's a dumb analogy. I'm not mad at my stepmother or my mother.
Yeah.
They're who they are. They're three of the most miserable human beings, two dead, one not, that ever lived. They will never get it. They never did get it. Your goal is to get it and to get out of it.
Yeah.
I don't have to be a product of them and their thinking. I don't have to be that. I can make a choice. The human brain is plastic, as they say. You can change. You can think different thoughts. You can make good decisions. You can climb out of almost any hole.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard, but you can.
Yeah. Much
harder to stay in the hole.
Yeah, 100%. I want to talk a little bit about the book, the actual book, and not the story. You ended up selling, I believe I saw it was over 160,000 copies so far. Which
13 languages, and you can buy it in Russian.
Russian. Das vidanya. And, a lot of success for a first-time author. 160,000 plus 13 languages is damn near impossible for a first-time author if he doesn't have like a big following or a big name or is a celebrity like you said earlier. Yeah. What do you attribute that success to?
I had good help. Thank you, Sandra Jonas. Thank you, Jill Tappert, my publisher and publicist. They're good, really good people. I knew I had a story that was really unusual. I knew that even as a kid throwing cherry bombs at Navajo Indian coming into Gallup, I knew I was witnessing the end of an era. I saw injustices in my own house, in the society I was in, and racial things that were extraordinary. I knew by the time I hit 21 that I had lived a very unusual life, even by very unusual circumstances.
Yeah.
I also knew that it was the kind of story when I read other memoirs, and I love reading them, Frank McCourt, Angela's Ashes, Jeanette Walls, The Glass Castle, and on and on. Every time I read one, I say, well, I have a better story than that, I promise you. Or it's good.
Yeah.
I went through as much or more than that. My circumstances were at least as unusual and hard to overcome as that. But I was locked into a paralyzed emotional mess. I was an emotional blob of jelly when everybody else is formed. I couldn't get out of my own way, right? I want to tell you my story, but then I'd start crying or then I'd feel guilty I told you. And, I met this girl in college that I'm madly in love with then. Mm-hmm. And her dad was a retired professional hockey player. And her mom was like the great mom. And they kept saying, we'll understand your family. you can marry our daughter. It's like, no, you won't. I mean, we just buried this guy in West Virginia. It's like, I just said, I have nothing to offer you. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And 40 odd years later, I got an email from her when the book started doing really well. Oh, why didn't you tell me? What the hell do you think I didn't tell you? Are you kidding me? Of course I didn't tell you. And of course I didn't want your family to know me.
Yeah.
So I went through an adulthood that was really not very good for me. I had my dad's ability to project happiness or pretend to be. I had enough intellectual smarts to be good at what I did, but inside I was always a mess. Mm-hmm. And I could never be honest with anybody. I mean, you never be honest with anybody. They won't be honest with you. The man that doesn't trust can't be trusted. These are all axiomatic truths. And I had all of those issues, right? You can know me if I'm funny. I'll tell you the most jokes and I'll drink the most beers and we'll do the most laugh. You try to get inside, you ain't going to get there. And I'm going to turn it into a joke. I'm a mark. And I had the ability. So with all my friends, it's like, he's the wisecracking genius of the age, but we don't know him.
Yeah.
When I wrote the book, a lot of my college buddies, they're really good guys. They're guys like you that, I wish you were my next door neighbor. But they all said, "What? We didn't know. Why didn't you tell us?" Couldn't tell you. Are you kidding me? And their wives all read it. I think my first 5,000 reviews. I mean, I've been really lucky. 19,000 reviews on Goodreads. I'm closing in on 7,500+ on Amazon. About half of those are people who know me. And it's like, wow, you went through that and you never told. Here's the thing, people reading this book, you can't tell. You know, everybody, I mean, people have bad people in their family and stuff, but no one has my collection, right? And or not many. And so when I finally got to the point of writing the book, I knew I had, the story was a masterpiece. Could I get out of my own way to tell it? And that was my issue. I'm a business guy and I didn't know how to do creative writing, but I knew that I had a masterpiece. It was there. I went through stuff that was enough. Like, I would trust friends as I got much older, would tell them pieces and their jaw would drop. Guys that had known me a long time and said, oh my God. And I said, well, that's not even 1% of it. And I'd tell another story. Oh my God. Oh, that's not even another 1%.
Yeah.
And finally, one of my really good friends, a guy named John Campbell, who's worked with me my adult life, he said, you got to write a book. He said, read Jeanette Wall's book, The Glass Castle. So I didn't read it for a year. Then he handed it to me again. I read it in like 2 readings. And it's a great book by a great author. The Glass Castle, people. It's really, and the movie was good. But I said, John, my story's better than that. I mean, I went through way more than Jeanette did. I would tell her that if she's here. Maybe not way more, but plenty more. I read The Liars Club by, last name is Carr, Lover, K-A-R. I read all those, and not that you went through more or worse, but I had a story that was comparable.
Yeah.
I had lessons that were comparable. I had things to overcome that would make your jaw drop. And it went full circle from on a reservation to United States Senate to, it was just an amazing American life that I just happened to be the caboose on the train. Yeah. Could I tell the story? And once I could tell the story sold itself.
Yeah. Wow, David, this was eye-opening, sobering, fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for your honesty and your willingness to be open. I really appreciate you talking to me today. This was absolutely amazing.
Roy, you've made a friend. Anytime you're near McLean, I'd love to see you. If I get to Connecticut, I'd love to see you. And, you know, this is the kind of thing that makes this book so rewarding. You meet friends and you're able to share things you never thought you could tell anybody.
Yeah.
You're able to say, I could never figure anything out. You could fill a library with the self-help books I read. Am I right that these books are all bad? No. What I'm right about is about me. None of them touched my heart in a way that made me unravel how I was broken. It can be different for everybody. But when I was lucky enough for that to happen, it wouldn't have mattered how much I'd been through if I hadn't come through the other side. But now when I go to book clubs or writing conferences or, you know, I won a Spur Award with Western Writers, first time author. And I was so happy because I love those guys.
Yeah.
And they come up and congratulate you. And I said, well, you're one of the great writers. All of you are so great. I'm not. But I had a story that not many people have.
Mm-hmm.
And that I was able to tell it with a smile that I'm okay. I'm married to an incredibly wonderful woman. I have 2 and a stepson who's like a son to me. I have 3 incredible kids in my life. Now 2 grandchildren. My wife's family is like the best people I know. It's like I married into a Norman Rockwell painting.
Yeah.
My brother's good. My sisters are, you know, they're doing okay.
Mm-hmm.
Life is good. And I never thought life would be good.
Yeah.
Not for me.
That's awesome, man. It's awesome. Where obviously the book, I'm sure you can find it everywhere you can buy books, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. But anything you want to plug, where can people find you? How can they follow you? You know, what are the best places?
DavidCroweAuthor.com. And if you send me an email, you'll hear back from me.
Okay.
Just one word, davidcroweauthor.com. Amazon or any of that will have 1,000 things on it. You can listen, you can Kindle, you can hardback, paperback, you can big print. A lot of libraries ask me to send a big print copy for their older readers. I'm glad to do that. I visit libraries all the time. It's in hundreds of libraries now. I'm amazed how many libraries are in touch with me. It's in at least a dozen prisons that I know of. So you can go to the prison library and get it. I've had somewhere around 50 to 70 Zoom book clubs. If you have a book club and you want to do a Zoom book club with me, go to davidcroweauthor.com. Just ask me. I've had fun with this. Not fun because I can brag about anything. There's nothing to brag about. A smart man would have figured this out at 25, not 55. So there's, if you want to send me any medals, don't.
Yeah. Well, there's no comparison. Everyone figures things out at the pace that they do based on their life circumstances, their environment, their, biology. It's just, there's no, I don't think there's like a set time where you have to figure things out. Some of the most interesting people, there's that Baz Luhrmann song, kind of a song where he says like some of the most interesting people I know haven't figured things out when they're 50. Some of the least interesting people I know, figured it out when they're 20, quote unquote. So,
or had all the answers at 18.
Yeah.
But then they're so arrogant. Well, not. But I appreciate you saying that, boy. I mean, I could have never figured it out. I have in my siblings who I'm really loved, and I could never have gotten through this without my sisters and brother. To a certain extent, they haven't figured it
out.
Yeah. And I can tell that when I'm conversing, and I can tell that they've been through things. I mean, who's to say that my life wasn't by far the easiest of the four? Because I was in my dad's head, so I could soften some of the blows, right? I think I took more blows. And in fact, at the end of the book, and again, I think the reader will like it, but because of my dad alone, just capturing him is, one of your world's most unforgettable characters. Reader Digest used to put your world's most unforgettable character, and they'd write it. I think my dad can beat every guy every week, every year. But when Dad and I knew it was the last time, and any father, son, any daughter, mother, I'm not trying to be sexist. I keep talking about men because I am one, but anybody who goes through this, my wife and I just went through it with her mom, right? But when my dad was going to die, and I knew it was the last time, I walked in to a really dark room. And he had been in a semi-coma for a day or two. And I said, Dad, it's me. And he reached up with his right hand and he squeezed my hand so hard, it almost broke the knuckles. He had all that physical strength. God, he was strong. And he said, boy, I always loved you the most. You were always the one. I'm like, not exactly the greatest. That's like a warden walking up to you and saying, you're going to get the most extra jail time for this breakout attempt. Like, kind of, not exactly what you want to hear. But yeah. I knew he meant it, so it's different than that. And when he said, reach down and kiss me, like, this would be like, what? Al Capone asking you to cleanse him at a baptismal. You're like, you mean this?
Yeah.
So I kissed him on both cheeks, which is so weird because he would have called me every name in the world. You just wouldn't even get near him. And then he pulled my shirt to his forehead and just said, don't forget this. You were always the one. Thank you for what you did for
me. Yeah.
And man, I lost. I said, always loved you too, Dad. You were a great dad. And he said, when you do the eulogy, promise me you'll do it right. And I said, I will. And I did. So in the eulogy, I had to do two things: not lie, but also do the proper thing for a father to his son. I stayed up all night. It probably took me 14 hours to write this thing. And I started by saying, when Dad was 4 years old, he read the newspaper to his illiterate father on his deathbed. By the time he was 6 or 7, he could pick more cotton than most grown men, and had to support his family. He's the smartest man I ever met. He could pick up math and physics books and tell you they spoke to him, that they answered their own questions. Yeah. The distance he traveled is so great that even as I stand on his shoulders, I've only moved the bar less than 1 inch. That he was the most curious, the most intense, and the most interesting person I have ever known in my life. That the things he was able to do and the path he traveled is extraordinary. The things I watched him do on both ends of the spectrum were extraordinary. How he lived to be 85 years, 6 months, and 13 days, I will never know.
Yeah.
But I said, I'm going to quote one of the great poets, and, forget how I put this. It was, though you lay there dying, that, you sang from your chains in the sea. And I said, you are that man, and your force will never be forgotten by the people that know you. Yeah. You don't believe in God. I do, unfortunately for you, but I will tell you this. I will remember you often and well for every day of the rest of my life. And I had told him that I was going to write a book, and I was going to tell all. And this isn't in the eulogy, but I did it about 3 months before he died. And he got really mad at me. He said, don't you dare. Oh, yeah, I'm gonna. And I tracked down your accomplice's son. I gave your accomplice's son's daughter an internship. I apologized to the family for what you did to them. He'd never get a job. He never got it off this record. And I thought he was going to kill me. I said, I'm going to call you out.
Yeah.
I don't care what you say to anybody else. You can be a Cherokee warrior, you can be anything you want. But what you did to George Wolverton is unforgivable. And you know it in your heart. And I did what I could to help this family. And I brought them the entire prison record, freedom of information. I told them, I gave them your prison record. I gave his granddaughter an internship and got her in the Air Force. And I apologized to his family from ours. Like it, don't like it, I did it.
Wow.
And I said, that will give me the courage to write this book. And I am calling you on it because you need to be called.
Wow. I feel like that's a perfect place to end the podcast. Guys, if you should 120% go buy this book, Paleface Lie. It's unbelievable story. We only touched on some of the things. There's much, much, much more detail. So 100% go buy the book. It's unbelievable. David Crowe, thank you so much. I appreciate your time and honesty, as I said. And yeah, this was incredible.
Roy, Ben, you're an amazing guy. Glad to be your friend and hope our paths cross again. Thank you for a wonderful time with your listeners.
Thank you so much, man. I hope so as well.
You bet. Take care.